Okay, friends, I am super excited for who you get to meet today. I'm sitting here with my new friend, Joanna Gott. Joanna, welcome to Girls Night.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
This is so fun. What would you go back and say to yourself as this is not turning out the way you planned? And also, what would you say to people who are in a similar spot?
I mean, I'm an absolute control freak. I think that's been one of my biggest issues my whole life. It's something I continue to struggle with, of just wanting to control and overtly plan every aspect of my life. And I think for me, it would be going back and just seeing the two most beautiful things that have happened in my life, which was making the huge move to Texas and then deciding to adopt, is when I completely surrendered and let go of control and just trusted that the promises put on my heart, that I just needed to trust that and believe in that and move forward, and honestly in complete faith. And I think that would be the biggest thing for me, is to just go back and just to say, let go. Don't try to control your life, because that's actually what's kind of causing it to come to this screeching halt. And it's something I still struggle with even in motherhood today. I think that's one of my biggest things, is wanting to control everything. And you have this little 5-year-old human that's like, no, I'm doing things the way I want them done. And I think even that, like, I look at all the ways that things in my life have prepared me for motherhood, in that sense of letting go of things and just trusting the day as it comes and not trying to plan out every aspect of my life, because as I've seen, things fall apart and don't go to plan. And when that happens, you just have to then continue to kind of almost stand up and dust yourself off and just be like, okay, that happened, was not expected. Like, here's what I'm going to do now, and to be okay with that.
Yeah. I really like that. Tell us a little bit more about adoption.
Yeah.
How did you decide to walk down that road? What happened? Tell us the story.
Yeah. So when I initially moved to Texas, I think, again, in my mind, I was like, I'm going to move and this is where I'm going to find my husband and we're going to start a family. Like, again, I came up with this whole plan in my head of what this was going to look like. And then I got to Texas and, within my first couple of years there, it was wonderful. But I'm like, okay, I have not met my husband. Things continue to not go planned the way I thought they would. And at that point, I was I was almost 39. So this was in 2017. I was almost 39. And I decided to make a list of 50 things to do before I turned 40. And I kind of it was everything from simple things to learning to how to bake bread to going to Paris. And then I had to look into the adoption process as one of the things on my list. My older sister has 3 little girls she's adopted from China. And so I was familiar with that program and just, again, loved witnessing what adoption does and just knowing the need that's out there as well, both domestically and internationally. And so I think as I approached 40, I really just was like, okay, again, my life is not going to plan the way I thought it would, but it honestly was just put on my heart to really pursue adoption. And I am a planner. I research things till their death. It's a really good trait, but also a really bad trait. And with adoption, it was on my heart. And I really didn't share that with many people. I shared it with my sister, Becky, who's adopted. And I shared it with a couple really close coworkers of mine. And I was like, I don't know. What do you guys think? And it was a Friday that I told my one coworker, I'm like, hey, it's just really pressing on my heart. Can you just over the weekend pray on this and see if there's any guidance or direction you're getting? By the time we came back to work Monday, I had started the adoption process. There was just a trigger that hit over the weekend that I literally felt like the Lord was just start this now. And I reached out to an agency, again, that I did very little research on. I did everything I would tell someone not to do when you're adopting. I did very minimal research. And I think in a way that was to protect me, because I think in my over planning, overachieving mind, if I had seen the process and the paperwork and the finances that went into it, I may have been too scared to actually pursue it. But I think because it was just something I felt such a calling to, I jumped in the deep end so fast and I just didn't look back. I started the process. And I think at that point, the panic set in a little bit when I started to get all the paperwork. But I also just see all the ways the Lord provided that the agency I went with is the most phenomenal. Like I couldn't have asked for a better agency, and just the home study process. Like there were just so many things that just aligned that again, like all I can say is it was all God's plan. And I think because I jumped in with such faith, he provided every single step of the way. It wasn't easy. And I definitely hit a lot of roadblocks, but I just knew that it was my calling to be a mom. And if it wasn't going to happen the way I thought it was, the Lord was having it happen in another way. And I believed that with all my heart, and found an amazing community of fellow single moms that have also adopted domestically and internationally. And that has just become like my sounding board for so many aspects of my life.
I love that. Gosh, I have so many follow-up questions to this. One of them is like, is this possible? We have a ton of amazing single women in our Girls Night community. And I just know that like, this is something that they've considered, but they're like, I don't know if I can do this. Or like, maybe this is something that is possible for someone with more resources or stronger or like better at researching or whatever. But like, I just don't know that I can do this. Is this possible?
100 million%. I mean, I think there's so many resources out there between agencies looking online, but I think the biggest resource that is, to me, the best kept secret of the adoption process is the adoption community, both adoptive parents and adoptees. This is a community of people that just wants to advocate and support and love and speak into those really scary areas. I mean, it is a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of paperwork. And yeah, the finances are there. I mean, again, I went into it, I hate to say blindly, but a little bit, a sense that like once I really started to like see like how much it was going to cost, like panic set in. But there's so many resources, from scholarships, grants, companies that do funding for it. I mean, even fundraisers, like there's so many different creative fundraisers out there, and just even family and friends that want to support you in it. And it's not all at once. I think that's the other thing, is it's not, and again, it's different for every adoption program. It depends internationally versus domestic. There's pros and, areas of opportunity, I feel like, for each one. But, in the most part, it's spread out that you're doing these payments. It's not a huge lump sum. So I think that also helps too. Like, yes, you're seeing this big number at the beginning, but that's over the course of the entire adoption process. And there are so many resources out there that help to aid with that, which I think is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that I am going to say this out loud, I'm like, where did I get this idea? And like, there's a solid chance it's from a Mary-Kate and Ashley movie. I feel like you might, the movie It Takes Two?
Yes.
Okay, like she wants to adopt this sweet girl and she has the most incredible relationship with her. And she's like, yeah, but like they won't let me adopt you because I'm not married. And so when I trace that back, I'm like, yep, that idea came from a Mary-Kate and Ashley movie. Just saying in case anyone else has the same thing. But like, was that an issue? Like, is like your marital status part of the application? Like, are you docked for not being married?
You're not docked, but I mean, I think again, the China International Program is very open to that. I think the way their matching process is, I mean, yes, that's documented. And as a single woman, there was some additional paperwork I did have to do in order for that. And plus, like, my net worth had to be a little bit higher rather than if it's a married couple. I mean, there's those aspects, but international wise, and I can't speak for every program, but for the most part, almost I would want to say all of them are completely open to single women. Even domestically, like I have two friends that are amazing single moms that have adopted domestically. The domestic process just looks a little different because domestically, the birth parents are picking the adoptive parents. Like they're kind of going through files, to pick that. So a lot of birth parents, whether it's their preference, if they're looking for a couple versus a single person. So I know with my single friends, like that's the one thing is they're like, is a birth mom going to want to pick a single mom to be her mom? And very clearly, yes, because they are both mamas to amazing little girls.
My immediate thought when you said that was if she's smart. Like, yeah.
But internationally, I mean, there was just some additional paperwork, but I was in no way like docked or like put to the back of the line because I'm a single parent. Like that's not even a consideration for them.
Yes. Okay. I'm so glad I asked about that. Seriously, someone like, you guys let me know if I'm the only person who like isn't thinking about that Mary-Kate and Ashley movie. Okay. This is so special. I'm so glad to get to ask you about this. What did the process of like actually, so you're doing all the paperwork, you do the home study. I feel like a lot of us have like kind of a general knowledge of the process, but like, how did you get matched with your daughter? Like, how long was it? You like went to go meet her? Like what, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I started the process July of 2018. My home study, I think, was complete that December. And a lot of it is just based, I mean, a lot of it you don't have control over, but a lot of it is also based on how quickly you do the paperwork, how quickly you do the research. There's a lot of testing that's involved, a lot of reading. So you do in some aspects control like how fast or slow the process can be. I finished my home study and then, so basically your home study and all of your paperwork, your medical, I mean, you have to do all these medical tests, medical exams, every aspect of your life is written down on paper. It's the craziest. You have this file that literally just contains your entire life in it. And you send that file to China. Like when it's all said and done, it's called your dossier and you send it to China. Once they receive that, then you're logged in to their system. So you get your login date, which that's a huge milestone in the adoption community. You very much celebrate that login date because not only does that mean that like all of that paperwork and craziness is done, but at that point, that's when the matching process starts. So to be matched, and this is a challenging part, I would say, of the process. Is you're basically given a form that breaks down gender, age range, and just a list of medical needs. And you basically have to go through and kind of decide what you're willing to be open to. And it's so hard. I remember my agency was really supportive in this, that they're like, of course, as a parent, you want to say, I'm open to anything and everything, like any child. But I think there's also a reality there that, while I would want to say that, financially, time-wise, resource-wise, like what can I actually take on with a child? I mean, at the time I was in Waco, Texas, which is a bigger city, but I knew medically wise, if I was getting a child that had a lot of special needs, that would mean driving up to Dallas or driving down to Austin for doctors. And I'm like, is that even an option? It was hard to like, you felt like by every box you didn't check that you were open with, you were saying no to a child. It was a really hard, but I think you just had to be open and honest to what you were open to at that point. So you fill out this medical form that's sent with your dossier. And at that point, once China logs you into their system, that's when the matching process starts. So they have all the files from all the different social welfare institutes. And then depending on where you are in the queue of parents, that have submitted their dossiers, that you just get matched that way. But the crazy part is that once you're matched, you get this child's file. You literally have 48 hours to decide if you want to move forward or not, with maybe a handful of pictures, a medical form that you have to translate to see like what their medical needs are. And you from the moment you get that file, it's like the clock starts and you have 48 hours to let China know if you're going to make that decision or not, which I think that was the craziest 48 hours of my life.
And also like, is there a world where you say no? Like, do you feel like that's even an option? And how would you even know? Like, I mean, I guess you've pre-selected, like, I can't handle this. I can't handle this. So it matches that. But like, that seems also really challenging.
And it is. And I do know families that have said no. And I know it was a heartbreaking decision, but and it's also hard too, because you're doing this based on very minimal information. That's also older information too. I mean, this is information from when the child is first submitted to the Social Welfare Institute. And that could have been years that have passed. And who knows what medical needs have come up since then. So I think like with any child, when you have a child biologically, you don't know what those medical needs are going to look like. Like all the ultrasounds, everything looked healthy, but you just don't know. And so I think you're also just, you're seeing what's on paper, but then you're like, okay, like, but who truly knows what this is going to look like when I actually meet my child? And the matching process, and this is all the timelines I'm giving are pre-COVID, because the program has kind of in some ways stopped at this point. It's not moving forward. They haven't officially closed it, but there's actually no movement happening currently. They're not processing any new documents or anything. And that actually played a huge part in my wait, because normally once you're logged in, the matching process, depending again on like what you're open to or not, and what medical needs you checked off, can take anywhere from like 3 to sometimes 18 months. Also, depending on how many families are adopting at that time. I was logged in, I think, April of 2019. And then I was matched with Penelope October of 2019. So that October. So from April to October, I was just in this waiting of like every day. Like if my agency called, the first thing they would say is, "You weren't matched. This is about something else."
Thank you.
Thank you for prefacing that. So then I was matched with Penelope in October of 2019. And then normally once you're matched, there's a little bit more paperwork you have to do. You have to get, your travel approval and everything from China. So usually between anywhere from 2 to 4 months, you travel. But of course, she was, it was beginning of November. We're dealing with holidays here in the US. The government offices are closed. And then you have Chinese New Year that happens, where on the China side, their offices are like shut down for weeks. So I was scheduled to travel to China February of 2020 to meet Penelope. But as you can imagine, that did not happen based on a lovely little virus that came to the surface. And it was interesting, I think, because of China, the involvement. We were starting to hear rumblings about it in December when it first, started kind of popping up in China. And I remember we were asking, all the parents were asking the agency, is this something we should worry about? I think it was just such an unknown at the time. And then when it, I think February is when it like first started then in the US. And at that point I was like, I don't know how this is looking. And then my flight was officially canceled. I think it was 10 days before I was supposed to fly out to meet her.
So what did you guys do? What did she do? Like, how long was it until?
A 4-year wait. So I literally waited 4 years almost to the day.
After you guys were matched. Joanna.
Yeah. So I was supposed to travel February of 2020, and I finally just traveled January of 2024.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. What did those years look like? Like, did you guys keep in touch? Did you FaceTime? Did you was that an option? Like, how's it going so far? Like, I just, this is.
I know. It was a tough and very refining 4 years of life. And children aren't, and for the China program, again, it's different for every program, but for the China program, I believe they aren't allowed to FaceTime with you until they're 6 or 7. They want them to be a little bit older, which I totally get. I mean, you have this 3-year-old that you're like, they're looking at the screen and they're telling them, that's your mama. And they're like, wait, what? Like, I'm sure it's a little confusing, but all communication is done through the adoption agency. So there's no direct contact until you've actually adopted the child, gone to China and physically adopted. Because that's when the adoption is truly finalized, is when you're in China. There's not any direct contact allowed. So all of it's done through your agency. But I think with COVID and everything that was happening, I mean, they were really good about trying to get as many updates as possible. I felt like she was in a really great social welfare institution that I received updates pretty frequently. That's not the case for all parents, which was so heartbreaking for me. You were allowed to send gifts. Like, we could send gifts at Chinese New Year. I could send her gifts on her birthday, send her a birthday cake. But it was definitely, I think, the hardest part was just seeing your child grow up thousands of miles away, seeing her. I mean, when I was matched with her, she had just turned a year old. So, I missed the first steps, her first words. You just missed all those milestones that I just was like, this can't be the plan. Like, I think it was one of those moments where I honestly was really angry for a while of just not understanding, like, this promise was put on my heart. I was faithful. I went all in. Like, I got so close, and now it's just, again, come to a screeching halt where I just felt like the rug was ripped out from under me. And I'm like, is this what was supposed to happen? Was this the decision I was supposed to make? Like, of course, just thoughts are going through your head. And, but I'm also, that 4 years of waiting, while it was incredibly challenging, I just look at all the ways I was prepared for motherhood in that wait. As much as you can be. I don't think anyone's ever prepared.
No.
I don't think you can ever fully be prepared for what motherhood actually is. But I think there's just so many aspects of how I grew, just, in my relationship with the Lord. I moved back to Washington State, which is where, born and raised, all my family's here. Because while you're in the adoption process, you cannot make any major life changes. Any major life changes that happen, you have to update all your paperwork. And it's a nightmare. No one will do that. But at some point, I mean, about 2 years into this wait, I was like, my life can't just be on hold this whole time. Like, I just felt such a pull to move back. So I was able to move back to Washington State, which was such a blessing. And I just see so many ways that while the timing didn't make sense to me, I now look back and just see how that time was used and how it's even being restored right now. And just seeing her personality and just seeing the strong, resilient little girl that she is, I'm so thankful that she also had, I mean, while of course I wish she had been home with me, but I have to trust that during that time that her heart was changing too, and that she was being prepared for this crazy life switch that she has had, that comes with its own trauma and having to rebuild. And I just see how both of our hearts were getting worked on. And while I'm so sad I missed those years, I'm also thankful knowing that there's lots of years and memories still ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a great way to look at it, and a hard way to it's arriving at that place is really hard work, but
Yeah.
I feel like that's I just know that's going to speak to so many women. Tell me a little bit about I want to hear just a little bit about your career in all of this, because one of the things that I think is most challenging, or at least for me today, about this everything era, about just life as a woman, is that we have so many different lanes that we're driving in all at the same time. And so as we're trying to figure out one part of our life, the other parts of our lives don't stop.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your career and what that's sort of looked like in all of this as well.
Yeah. I mean, so at the age of 18, my poor mom, I made the decision. All of a sudden, I was like, I don't want to go to college. I had been accepted to a college. I made this last minute decision. I look back, I'm like, I probably gave my mom so many heart attacks. But my mom, bless her, was like, okay, that's fine. But then you're getting a full-time job, which again, I look back and I'm like, that's honestly what started everything, because I got a job in retail. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the retail world. And I started literally just as a salesperson, and I started helping doing like the window displays and helping around the store. From that, I ended up getting a regional merchandising job for this company that I went to different stores and would merchandise for them, and really just got into clothing and all of that. And then that led to I eventually did go to college because I got my degree in fashion design. I think I just found this world that I loved and got a degree in fashion design, did that route for a little bit, but I missed retail. I missed retail so much. And so got back into the retail world. I did visuals for Anthropologie. I did them for Nordstrom. I worked for Nordstrom Corporate for almost 10 years, helping them open new stores. But then that's when I kind of just felt like everything plateaued a little bit. I felt like I was on this trajectory, and then suddenly it was just like, and at the time, one of my dear friends and a mentor to this day, Kelsey, was talking about this show in Waco, Texas. She's like, there's this show I found, and it's this cute couple and they fix up homes. And she was like, she just kept talking about Waco, Texas. And I was like, what are you even talking about? And she's from Texas. She loved Texas. And so she was like, yeah, Waco. And she was like, and I've heard they're opening a store. You should find them on Instagram. And then this is when Instagram was kind of just started. This is 2014, 2015. Instagram was kind of just really starting to take off at that point.
Yeah.
So I found she just kept talking about it. So I finally went on to Instagram and I looked up, who this couple was. And literally the day I went to their Instagram account, they posted that they were hiring for a visual manager. And I was like, okay, why not? I have nothing holding me here in the Seattle area. And I applied, and for months didn't hear anything. Months went by and I just was like, okay, but I kept being the one thing my friend Kelsey always told me. She's like, be the squeaky wheel, always reach out, always reach out, always reach out. So every month I would send an email. And then it was finally October of 2015. And they had just opened their brand new, huge Magnolia Market store. And I felt a prompting, send one last email, just one last. So it was like my Hail Mary. I sent an email. It was Halloween night. I remember I was with my sister and I sent the email. I woke up the next morning to an email saying, can you please call? And it was a hiring manager from Magnolia that was like, hey, are you still interested in the job? Within a week, had flown down, took the interview, and within 2 weeks had made the decision to sell everything in my life and move to Waco, Texas.
Oh my goodness. I love hearing these things so much because I think that there's like when I'm thinking about your story, there's so much like so many areas where you've had to take action. And then also so many areas where you've just had to wait. And then also so many places where you've had to be persistent. And I think that that's the persistence is something that I'm like, I'm learning about even today is that you can feel a prompting to do something. You can want to do something. And there may be a lot of steps forward and like stubborn steps forward before anything happens with it.
Yeah.
And like, that is so, I want to like dip my toe in the water and be like, oh, nope, I didn't achieve success right away. I guess it's a no. Like, I feel like so many of us are guilty of that though. Like it's, if we're knocking on a door, we're like, tap, tap, tap.
Yeah.
Oh, didn't hear anything. Okay, I guess that's it. And like, you wouldn't have your daughter. You would not have gotten that job. You wouldn't have, like, so many things wouldn't have happened if you wouldn't have kept trying. And I think that is like, that's a real discipline and something I think a lot of us are working on.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, I think so many times, like after a couple tries, you're like, oh, I don't want to be that annoying person that's like over and over and over and over. And, you know, and I think there's just a gauge to that of like, at what point, like, do you stop? And I think that's always a question, you know, and I think even in the adoption process, that was a huge, I mean, in a 4-year wait, there were families that made the decision of like, we're switching to another program. We're taking a different route because we can't keep waiting. And it was something where I was like, I had to come to a place of being comfortable with I may not know this side of heaven, like why this happened or what this outcome is going to be. And I have to be at peace with that. And I had to make the decision that I was like, I'm going to hold on to China until I am told no. And that might be 10, 15 years. But I was like, I knew in my heart that that was the decision I made. And I kind of dug my heels into the ground and just stuck with that. But it was hard to get to that place and hard to be at peace with making that decision. Because then every time you heard of a family that was like, we switched over to another program. And then you would see families switching over to other programs and then coming home with like their child that they'd been matched. And you're like, I've been waiting this whole time. And like they switched programs and they were matched and came home in that time frame. And you did start to question a little bit like, did I make the right decision? And I think it's easy to always want to get outside counsel. And I think that is important. But I think at some place you also just have to like really have that conversation with yourself and be at peace with that with yourself.
How do you like, gosh, this is a giant question, so good luck. But like, how do you decide if something is, I don't know, like a couple times you've said like, I just knew, or like, I knew in my heart, or I like, what is that? I think it's different for all of us, which is what's tricky, but like, what does that knowing look like or feel like for you?
I think for me, I kind of go through the process of just being a little angry and letting myself be angry and letting myself question things. And then honestly, for me, it's just going to the word. Like for me, it's prayer time and going to the word, because that's for me the only place I'm going to find truth. And, you know, I will go to friends for counsel. I'll go to family for counsel, and to like, I think at the end of the day, and, you know, I did a real deep dive into the book of Job during this time.
I bet you did.
I'm really going to dig into this book and like really, but I think at the end of the day, it was just, you kind of have to just be very humble and transparent. And like, I don't know all the answers, but at some point I had to make the decision and go with it based on, you know, what I was feeling in prayer, what I was getting from the word. And this wasn't a decision that was, you know, made over even just a couple weeks. I mean, this was months of just like really devoting myself and feeling open. And there was a long time frame where I just felt a lot of silence. And that was really frustrating as well. Cause I'm like, I'm put in this situation and now like, you're not giving me anything. Like, what is happening here? And I think even in that actually like pushed me harder. I mean, there's that persistence again to like, just keep like diving into it. Cause I was like, I'm going to hear from you at some point. Like, Lord, you answer me at some point here. So I'm just going to keep pursuing you to like figure out what that is.
Yeah. There's, in this is so fresh because I just spent, the last 2 years working on this book. But one of the things that I talk about in the book is, our process of becoming parents ourselves. And it took me a really long time to decide to know if I wanted to be a mom. Like, I think I thought I always would want to be a mom at some point, but then I'm like getting older and, I've been married a while and I'm like, this has not shown up yet. Like, it was a really, really conscious decision for me and for my husband too. And, but then once we started trying to get pregnant, we found out that it was not as easy as we thought. And so it took us a really long time and a lot of help to have our kids. And so in the book, I'm like, there are things where there are so many parts of our lives that we can't control. And yet through that experience, I got to find out that there are still a handful of things that we can control when we're faced with situations like this. And the options, I'm going to see if I can remember them off the top of my head. One of the options that we have is to quit. Yeah. That's an option. And I feel like until we give ourselves that option, it's harder to choose to like stay in it. Mm. And so like, I'm sure you came to that point where you're like, okay, like, do I walk away? Mm-hmm. And by asking that, you get to go, no, I'm going to keep going. And so then the second option that I kind of discovered was like, you can keep trying. Yeah. And like you said, I'm going to stick with China for 10, 15 years, however long it takes. Like, I'm just going to keep trying. And there are so many things like your job with Magnolia, where it's like, it wasn't that it wasn't for you. It's just, it took 15 emails, like it wasn't not for you. It just wasn't, it just hadn't happened yet. Yeah. And then the fourth option I think I say is, to try something different. And so it's like, if you're like, you've been putting in the same elements and the cake keeps coming out the way you don't want it, like in a way that you don't want, like try some different ingredients. Yeah. And then I think the last one I said is to ask for help. And that ultimately for us was how we ended up having our girls. Was like, we tried everything that we could do on our own and it was beyond us. And so that's when we really asked for help. But that idea of like, well, I'm just going to keep walking down this road until I'm going to keep showing up until you talk to me, God. Hello, like still here. Or I'm going to keep trying until this works out. And I just think that there's so much power in that.
There is. And I think, I'm probably going to mess the story up, but I know there's like the story of, there's the guy that's on the roof because it's flooding. And he's like, Lord, sent, help me. And, and a guy with a boat comes by and he's like, do you need help? And he's like, no, like the Lord's got me, an hour later, the boat keeps coming by and eventually the guy drowns and he gets to heaven. He's like, I asked you to help me and you didn't help me. And he's like, I sent you 3 boats. Like, and I think like there's so many times because we're so like hyper focused on one thing that we don't see the other options that are coming up and the other opportunities that are there, or that like there is a different path and that you can't be so laser focused on the one that you're going to miss out on what the actual plan is versus the one that you have in your head or the timeline that you have in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay. I have one last question I want to ask you. I want to know, and this can be like work related, this can be motherhood related, this can be home related, which I like have a feeling you have a really cool house. I feel like you have have a really cool space. I want to know anything that comes to mind that you do that is beautifully rebellious. So like everyone says it has to look like this, but you know what? I do things this way and it works great for me and my family.
I mean, I kind of have 2 different answers to that. Like, I think one is, while I love trends, but like, do what makes you happy with your house. Like, I'm an introvert. I'm such an introvert. Like, and I have an extroverted daughter who is forcing me to have to get out of the house. But so for me, like, I love seeing the trends are happening. I love seeing things are going on. But for me, it's about having a comfortable house. But I think even more so now that, Penny's here, it's making a house that she's comfortable with too. And it's been fun to actually involve her in that process. Like the other day, we were picking a wall color and there was just this one other color she wanted. And I was like, sure, like it's your house too. Like, I mean, it's not just, so I think for me, it's been fun to see because I think I thought with motherhood that like everything would just stop, that like I would never be able to do another project or anything because I have a child in my life now. And that's not the case. It takes longer and it's a heck of a lot messier. But I think it's so fun that I now have this, little 5-year-old human in this house that I'm like, I want her to have a say. And she has chosen some things that I'm like, oh gosh, like in my perfect visual world, because I'm such a visual person. And again, my perfectionism, I just like things to be a certain way, like even how the vases are arranged on the table. And she'll just come in and start, and like my anxiety starts to, I'm just like, no, let her do, like, I love that she's so comfortable that she knows this is her home.
Yeah.
And that she can do these things. And I think, in this world where we want things to be Instagram worthy and Instagram perfect, like, I think for me, it's come to this place where I'm like, I'd rather have it feel comfortable for myself and my daughter, and that it's a place we love and it's not trendy and it's not what everyone might be doing out in the world right now, but it's a place we both love to call home. And I think the older you get, that's kind of just how it is. Like you just want a place that you feel comfortable and that's home to you, despite what the world is telling you it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You said that there were two things. Is there one other thing that you wanted to say?
It's more work related, is I think saying no to things. I think creating boundaries and saying no to things. And I think especially as a woman who's trying to build your career in your 20s and your 30s, you want to say yes to opportunities. You want to say yes to all these things. But I think in that, you can lose those boundaries. And once you lose those boundaries of work-life balance or whatever that looks like, it's really hard to then get that back. And it's really hard to then put up those boundaries after a while. And I think it's okay to come in and to have your own standards and expectations. And I think again, sometimes as women, when we're trying to build this career, we want to be those yes people and we want to be open to everything. But I think there's something to be said about being like, no, I don't want to do that. Or, and I think that's something else. If I could go back to my younger self, I'd be like, it's okay to say no. It's okay to not work until 7 p.m. every night. Like, I think there's just so many expectations that you want to make yourself proud and you want, to impress your boss and all these people. But at the end of the day, like, is that your legacy in life? I don't know. For some people it might be, but I think that's also a decision you have to make. But that would be my advice to young women in the workforce is it's okay to say no and to create those boundaries so that you have that work-life balance and that you have that life that you love.
I love that. Joanna, thank you so much for coming on the show. I just adore you.
This was so wonderful.
Okay, so for women who haven't met you yet, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and a fun fact about yourself?
Yeah. So my name's Joanna Gott. I am a new mom through international adoption. I am currently a content director for Emily Lex Studios, which Emily Lex is an amazing artist, watercolor artist, and author. And a fun fact, this was, I had to think through this. Well, I was like, fun fact. I know the entire Thriller dance, the entire Michael Jackson Thriller dance, and I once won first place in a Thriller dance contest.
That is exactly what we're here for. That is so amazing. That is so amazing.